everybody, I'm Lauren.
I'm Emma.
And you're listening to the Oakview. Hi, Emma.
Hey, Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Today's been a good day. I got to do a lot of different tasks at work, so I feel like I've been productive, which is kind of rare for a Monday.
Right? Yeah. I'm glad you feel accomplished.
Thank you. How are you doing? How is everything?
It was kind of a different day at work. I didn't do what like I normally do. I got stuck in some different things, but I mean, it was fairly average.
Were you in a different department or something? So you weren't doing like your regular
I was
tasks?
just helping out with something I normally, I don't do often, which is fine.
Oh,
So
yeah, that makes sense. Well, Lauren, I think today's going to be our first actual guest that we're having on our podcast.
I know. Isn't that exciting?
It's really exciting. And it's exciting because like we know this person quite well.
Of course.
I'm not going to give it away, but Lauren and I have always thought about how important it is to have different perspectives, especially because we are two people that pretty much are the same. And although we have different opinions, we like to hear from other people and their backgrounds and what they bring to the table.
And also, I think this podcast gives us a really good opportunity just to learn new things and to engage in topics that wouldn't necessarily like come up in our mind because we know great people and that we want to know better.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of what my perspective and yours perspective might hinder our conversations is that our experiences are only our own. And we don't really necessarily know what these people could, introduce us to or enlighten us more on. And we want to talk about subjects that are really important to us.
Yeah, so I think it's fun to have a series of guests to just talk about interesting educational topics. So for us and for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to introduce the guest, if that's okay.
Okay, absolutely.
Her name is Candace Hanson. She is a marriage and family therapist. She specializes in play therapy for children. I know her because she's my sister. So her perspective today is really going to dive deep into child development. And Lauren and I are really curious about this because we're so passionate about STEAM for young girls and young boys who are striving to become the best versions of themselves. And we're curious how that overlaps with mental health. And she's a female business owner. Like, this is what we always like to encourage. So I don't know about you, Lauren, but I'm really interested in kind of hearing that different perspective.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn just kind of like how do children develop differently, and then how does she specifically or what's the most interesting thing to do with children that brings their thought forward, because obviously it's a lot different than speaking with an adult.
Absolutely. And although she is my sister, I'm going to hit her with hard questions. I want to know things about her field that could really benefit how we introduce resources to the people that are listening, because of course we're trying to get ourselves in there and let young women and young boys see that.
I'm interested to hear what specifically your questions are, because I know that you do have an interest in reaching out to the youth and young children from a young age as one of your personal life goals, if I'm able to share that about you.
That is definitely accurate. I love helping out the little ones. It also comes back to my job that I'm in at right now. We build schools for kids. So I like to see myself doing the full circle of life for here.
Yeah. Do you think about them when you're designing a school?
Oh, 100%. Part of our clientele conversations not only are about the administration and the teachers, but the kids. They're the ones using the spaces. They're the ones learning in them and benefiting from them, along with parents, outside guests, and multi-perspectives in architecture is key to creating great design.
Multi-perspectives in everywhere is key.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's so important that we have guests, because come on, are you kidding me? We need to know all the different avenues that are going to make us successful as people and successful in the things that we're passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited. So let's get started.
Let's get started. Okay, Lauren, we have Candace here, our first guest on our podcast.
Yay, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here because I already said it to the peoples, but I know you, but I want to know you from like a professional stance.
Mm-hmm.
And Lauren and I are so interested in your background and what you do with child development and kids and how that can really help us be good in our field and how we can ask people that we know about different resources. And could be really beneficial when we're trying to get young girls involved in science and engineering and architecture and what do we need to look for? And so we have a series of questions today, but thanks for coming. And, I don't know about you, Lauren, but I'm kind of excited that we have people coming on.
I know, we're so official.
We're
Yes,
all
you are.
professional here.
So Candace, do you want to just kind of like give yourself an intro and tell everybody what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Candace Hanson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and registered play therapist. And I own a private practice up in Hastings, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul. So right just outside the Twin Cities, or right inside, I should say, the Twin Cities bubble.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is your practice called?
It's called Holding Space Therapy. And yeah, do you want the background of the name?
You
Or-
can give us
Yeah,
whatever you
and when
want.
did you start
Yeah.
Yeah.
your own practice?
So opening day was September 1st of this year,
Cool.
which may sound a little crazy to open a business during a pandemic, but we have a lot of need right now for mental health services, especially for children and families. And I created the name essentially after a conversation with a colleague of mine. And it was just a really great conversation about life and work and our field and our goals. And I had already been racking my brain for a few months about the name. And on the drive home, I was just reflecting on that conversation with my colleague. And I was thinking, that felt really nice to be heard. And, it felt like he was validating me. And that's really what I want to give to my clients, a space for them to come in with their struggles and their challenges. And I'm there for them. And literally, as I'm driving over a bridge, I heard a voice behind me and it said holding space. And I was like, that's it. That's the name. And that's actually a term that we use in the field to, how I would interpret it is represent the concept of, holding energy and your story. And again, just, validation and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was really fitting.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. A really nice circle moment. It was, and I actually got a little emotional, which when I cry or feel something, heavy in my chest, it's always a sign that I'm on the right path. So
That's awesome.
mm-hmm.
Well, I think, at least for me, I'd like to know a little bit about your background before we dive into like you as a businesswoman.
Yeah.
So like, where did you go to school and like what kind of degrees do you have? So like people know that like you are definitely, an expert.
Well, it's tricky with that expert label because, I have specializations, but I can't quite call myself an expert per se. So, but yeah, to answer the question, my background is really just college essentially and then some hands-on experience. So I went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis for undergrad. And I originally tried to double major in psychology and music therapy, but that didn't, the music therapy part didn't happen. So I discovered actually that the U has child psychology. And I decided to switch my major because I have always wanted to work with kids in some fashion. And then halfway through undergrad, I added a family social science minor, which helped me understand a bit more about, family dynamics and just different types of theories that are out there. And then when I realized, grad school had to be the next step, I did some research and I came across marriage and family therapy. And based off of the research, just learned about family systems theory, which teaches us that we are all part of systems in our homes, outside of our homes, and we heal when in healthy relationships. And that just made good sense to me based off of the world I come from. And I just applied to a couple schools, didn't get into one, but got into then St. Mary's University in Minneapolis. And it was great. Graduate school was awesome. And then just starting grad school, I learned about play therapy and concentrated on that as well. Didn't get a degree or a certificate or anything, but just took all the classes and then kept studying and practicing that after grad school.
That seems like a pretty profound path for being in your 20s.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to be a therapist really since I was 15. That's when I discovered that passion. And it was really through being just that friend that everyone seemed to gravitate towards, told their struggles to, asked for advice. And I always laugh when I tell this story, but back then as a 15-year-old, not truly knowing what a therapist does, I was thinking, well, if I can get paid to tell people what to do, that sounds like a really great, career opportunity. But just to, add, we don't tell people what to do. And, it's a bit different than that. But
of course, everything's more complicated than we understand, but that's a great surface level description. So,
yeah.
So you said that you are a registered play therapist. So what does that mean if it wasn't part of your degree? What else do you have to do to get registered?
Yeah, great question. So there's the Association for Play Therapy, and they require extra supervision hours, training hours, education hours, essentially. And that just adds to the competency level. And I had to fill out an application and show proof of obtaining those trainings and supervision hours. And then, I sent that in and they approved me. And that's how I became the registered play therapist. So you have to be a licensed professional. So I was, I became licensed as a marriage and family therapist back in 2014, or I'm sorry, what am I thinking? 2016, 4 years ago. And, and then since, really all through these last 7 years after grad school, I had been participating in play therapy things. And so I was able to just log a lot of it, which really helped.
I think that's really awesome.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
We love the word awesome, but I genuinely think
a good word.
It's awesome. I'm kind of curious because, you have a really extensive research background and you have a lot of knowledge behind the work that you do. Like, how did you dwindle down to say, I'm going to work with kids?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, kids are just, they're a population that I've always gravitated towards. So I don't know, you told your audience that you know me. And
yeah, I did tell them why and how.
Yeah. So then, as people know, we have an older sister.
Yes,
as
this
well.
is one of two.
Yes. And so even when I think it was middle school, my older sister and I had a deal that I was going to be her live-in support and be then the nanny for her kids.
That's hilarious.
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then I learned how to babysit, and Laura and I babysat you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, our families are quite connected.
Yes, and so I took that class when you're 13 or something, and it's really evolved from there. Just volunteer opportunities, in church or the community. And just then learning in undergrad that they struggle as well with their mental health. And I'm not afraid of kids. They don't make me nervous. They don't.
Do you think that most people are nervous from children?
I can't say most. I don't know if there's any kind of survey out there about that. So I can't say most. And at the same time, some people just don't feel very comfortable. I've heard some people say I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help them. And this is not even in the therapeutic context.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's okay. But for some reason I was gifted with that ability. And, it's so fun to hear, what toddlers have to say or how 10-year-olds work through their challenges. I call them magical people. Kids are just magical to me, and they have this unique perspective of the world. And my hope is to be their advocate because, at least in our society, I think there is still what some people term childism, be quiet, your feelings don't matter, or just deal with the red cup that you got.
Right.
But from day one, children are whole people that deserve love and validation and attention, just like us adults.
We were talking earlier a little bit, me and Lauren, about how in architecture, I interview kids. Like, we don't just talk to the teachers and the administration and the parents, but we talk to the kids, and at little as kindergarten. And we ask them, we go, if you could do anything for your school, blue sky, what would you put? And they go, we want animals crawling through the hallways and a tiger in the gym. And those little moments that we have with them, as outrageous as that sounds as an architect, we actually are empowered by their excitement and their imagination. So I love that you use that and you're able to connect with them and explore their little imagination brains, because I think that's I don't know about you, Lauren, but when I was little, I had the best ideas.
I know you did.
I mean,
no, I think that's so sweet. And I think it's
that's hilarious.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, Candace, it must be so different on how you communicate with children and how children communicate with you as an adult. Is there one thing or one thing that you would tell people on how children communicate, or what to pay attention to, or how to approach those subjects when adults are I just don't know how to talk with them?
Yeah. It really depends on the age and the thing, if you will. So let's say you want to approach the topic of grief. How you would speak to the 3-year-old is very different than the 15-year-old. The younger we are, we need things in simple, concrete terms, essentially. So for example, some people view death as falling asleep, right? That's the terminology. They fell asleep. But if we tell a little kid that, grandma fell asleep, little kids don't understand that falling asleep and then dying is not the same thing as falling asleep at night. And so their imaginations and just where their brain is at developmentally, they're going to make up stories and they're going to run with it. And for some kids, that could turn into having a lot of anxiety at night,
Yes.
And so what I encourage people to do, especially the caregivers and the parents of my clients, is to read up on child development, and I'll send them some book recommendations or some website recommendations with developmental charts even, so they understand, where kids are at. And I think that's what our society needs to understand more too, is that our brains are developing from not only just conception, but through our mid-20s. And some research is saying closer to 30 for males. So, do our brains grow and change throughout, the entire lifespan? Absolutely. But that, that basis is the first 25 to 30 years of our life. That's intense, right? So, what I try and advocate for is to really understand, hey, we've got an underdeveloped brain here, and we need to understand that. We need to honor that. And that's how, we support the kid then.
That's awesome, Candace. Thank you for that. I think I want to break this down even more, Lauren. I don't know about you, but
Okay.
For Lauren and I's perspective, we come from a very logistical, concrete, everything has order kind of world. So I'm curious, because kids are so experimental, they speak how they feel. Lauren and I have talked in prior episodes about the complication of how often adults seem to dismiss those really simple minded perspectives that we like to call childish because they're children. But in reality, like, we know that girls as young as 5 start feeling that they are hopeless and not good enough, and they can't do anything because there's so many people around them that discourage them from dreaming big and trying new things and doing everything that the boys are doing. So it's like, how can someone like you really benefit our fields, and how can someone like you help us learn and have a change of perspective of how we teach kids about other subjects? Because, like, communicating, at least Lauren and I communicate once or twice a week over just, you know, face to face. But if you're with a child every day, and now everyone's e-learning, and this, you know, this pandemic, and the perspective of, you know, what's right and what's wrong is really all about, like, how supportive can that be? So I think the ultimate question in my ranting is, like, your perspective helps out in, I'm assuming, like, because people think therapy crisis, right? You go to therapist because chaos is happening. You go to a therapist because you're unsupported or you're feeling lost. But, like, for a kid, like, what does therapy do for a child, for them to continuously feel like they can be big dreamers? I know it's so big, but
that's
it's like
a profound question.
That's what we like to do here.
You know, I've never consulted with other professionals, you know, or I should say professionals in the STEM field. So, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to do my best here.
Or maybe if it's anyone, you know, like, how can we make sure that, like, fields like yours and mine and creative arts, because we just talked about also that STEM has now become STEAM.
Right. Yes, the arts.
So if it's all overlapping, where do you come in?
Yeah, and so things in our fields have concrete answers. Math problems have a correct answer. Science has a correct answer.
Correct.
And so, do those things feel limiting as a child? Because in English class, you can be creative, you can write, you can create worlds, but in math class, like, do you think that's thought of differently in a child's mind? Do you think that's putting them in a box?
Yeah, gosh. Well, I mean, children are, I want to be careful here because it's not, life isn't simple, right? Life is very, very complex. Right. And so you might hear people say, even professionals, or whether they're worldwide known or not, you know, children are super resilient and they're super vulnerable. And those things are true. And even with the scientific evidence that we have in our, I think it would be appropriate to call it the social science field, and I might be wrong, so forgive me if I, you know, to my folks out there if I've said that wrong. But even with the scientific evidence that we have, you know, we have things called protective factors that can help us get through challenge, you know, as a child or as an adult. But what we know is that children, if a child could have at least one caring, attentive adult in their life, that will set them up for a lot of success. And so I think it's interesting to be a kid because, you know, life sort of just happens to them a lot, right? You know, they are experiencing life. They know, you know, at least here in America, I can't speak about other, you know, cultures or countries. But eventually you start maybe reading the book with mom or dad or grandma, or maybe you don't get that opportunity, but like, okay, kindergarten is starting in 3 months, you know, let's prep for that. And then that sort of just happens to them. But just like any ability, right, even as adults, they're able to learn. And I just have to give a shout out to teachers, because teachers are incredible people. Like I have a lot of teacher friends, and man, especially this year, they need raises and bonuses and vacations galore. So shout out to all you teachers.
We literally just did a podcast about teachers.
Oh, did you? I'm a episode behind, so sorry I haven't listened. But so I don't know if I'm answering your question because I think it's such a profound question. But where I come in, that intersection, I guess, is, let's say a teacher has a student who is really struggling during math class. Maybe they're seeing some shutdown in the child or some disruptive behaviors. Ideally, right, then they're talking to the caregivers or the parents and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What could be going on here? And then in a lot of cases, I end up getting a call from that parent or that caregiver, hey, my kid is really struggling during school, they're acting out or something like that. And then, we start the therapy to figure out not only what's going on, but
so how do you approach that when you see the kid the next time?
Yeah. So I am trained in, the three therapeutic modalities that I use primarily, that I've been trained in, are experiential play therapy, which is a child-centered play therapy model, meaning that the child comes into the playroom and they are the ones in charge. I'm not telling them what toys to play with and how to play with them. They literally come in and I'm there to just hold that space for them, build that rapport with them, and be a witness to their story, essentially. And then there's something called EMDR, which is a trauma modality, and it helps the brain reprocess trauma, whether it was a one-time trauma or chronic traumas throughout your life. And even if you're 40 and let's say you had a trauma in early childhood that was never resolved, EMDR can help with that. So it's really powerful, that taps into the brain and the nervous system. Because what we know, and science has proved this time and time again, is that trauma gets stuck inside of our bodies, or it can.
Wow.
So that's why, you hear the word trigger, right? Like, oh, I was triggered.
Yeah, that's a very common phrase nowadays.
Right. And when we're thinking through the lens of trauma, I was in, not me personally, but just an example, like I was in a car accident, and this experience for me happened to be traumatic. So now I go about my day and I hear like a screech and my whole body tenses up. Oop, I hit the mic. Sorry. My whole body tenses up, or I feel like I'm back in that car. So those are those triggers essentially. And then I'm trained in something called TheraPlay as well, which is an attachment play-based model for adult and child to work through struggles. And then that's more directive. So that's the model that I am in charge, essentially deciding which activities.
So you lead a conversation.
So it's all play-based. And even with play therapy, talk is definitely something that can be part of the process. But what we know is that we need to be down inside of our core, inside of our body, inside of our nervous system when we're processing challenge, trauma, anxiety, all that kind of stuff, to then be able to release it and get that out.
So like, wow, you're saying instead of sitting down with like a 4-year-old and going like, Sarah, what's wrong? You're actually like playing with Barbies or something, or like you're interacting with her in a very child set.
Do you play with them?
Yeah. So so to answer Emma's question, right. So talk therapy is not appropriate for children. And even though we know that, it's still sort of slow to, really take on. Like, we in the play therapy world are fighting really hard to educate our colleagues, like, hey, you don't bring a 5-year-old into the room and you sit down on the couch or on the chair and say, how did you feel when, that boy hit you today? Obviously, we want them to be able to learn and say that was scary, or that hurt, or I felt sad, or I felt angry. But if it's something that's really weighing on them, play is the most appropriate way to help a child.
So how do those things reveal themselves? So if a child is leading the play session, if they're just playing, how does information come out of them?
Yeah, great question. So with that experiential play therapy model that I mentioned, we're looking at not only what toys are they using, but we also are looking at what is the story that the child is communicating. So for example, maybe they gravitate towards the bin that has what the model labels as aggressive toys. So swords, guns, handcuffs, a knife, a grenade. And there's debate in the field of, do we want to be, how realistic do we want those toys to look like versus just having a pool noodle instead that can be used as a sword, right? So there's debate there. But so let's say they gravitate towards those types of toys and their play involves robbing a bank or taking control or, I'm put in a role of a victim, get down on the floor and lay there and, don't talk or, it doesn't have to be that intense. But what they're showing us then, and I'm just speculating, and I'm not talking about any client in particular, I'm just making all this up off the top of my head, but what we can, assume then potentially is, gosh, the themes here are really that this kiddo does not feel empowered or they feel really scared about something. And what's so great about play therapy is that kids will come in and they not only need to feel safe in the room, but they need to feel safe with us. And so that rapport is so incredibly important. So we build that relationship and then they feel safe to show us the stuff. Okay, Candace, I know I can trust you. It's time. I'm going to show you that scary thing that happened to me. And then what's so wonderful, and it makes me a little emotional because it's just so powerful, honestly. And, kids are incredibly brave to get to that point where they show me what has happened in their life. And they show the challenge and the disruption, but then they become how do I want to say, they become, the person that gets through it, and we see then that empowerment stage where kids are like, I fought that battle. And in the safety of the play therapy room with the safety of my therapist, I won that battle. And, and it's really incredible. And it's all woo-woo and like the brain's involved and the nervous system is involved. And then my nervous system is involved and I'm helping them regulate in the play and all that kind of stuff. And that's how they heal.
I'm freaking out right now. This is so interesting. Emma, did you know any of this? No, I did not.
Like, for my brief time in this world, I remember I talked to Candace in grad school about like, I got to build this building for kids with cancer. Tell me about kids. And I swear, the things that comes out of her mouth, I don't even.
This just blew my mind.
I didn't even know that.
That is so.
I didn't know that.
That's just like, wow. What really resonates with me is like how you are just an observer. You don't even facilitate anything, and then all of a sudden you see their empowerment. And I like how you said they become the person that's lived through it or like is going through it or can handle it. And I think that's so interesting. Well, I mean, and I like that idea of sorry to interrupt you. I like that idea of empowerment because Emma and I talk about encouraging. So like how we were talking about STEM and STEAM, how do we encourage children to pursue these fields or like be interested and not be discouraged by them? So how does encouragement and empowerment look in this setting? Like how are children encouraged and empowered? Like what kind of environment reflects that?
Yeah. And so you're looking at that in your field, but you're curious about like through my field too.
Yeah.
Well, as a licensed marriage and family therapist, like I said earlier, family systems is really the basis for my group of mental health professionals.
Yeah.
Other licensure tracks teach it. And for MFTs, it's really the main focus. We don't grow up and live in vacuums. We grow up and live in systems. And because children are, there is that piece of vulnerability, right? And they have underdeveloped brains for the first quarter of their life. They need healthy and stable and consistent adults in their lives. And here's the reality of life, right? Sometimes kids don't have that. That's the reality. Sometimes kids don't have that consistent caregiver. So my job then becomes not only holding the child and helping them through their healing, but the way that I approach my work is that I'm also holding the entire system. So when people call me and ask about starting therapy with me, I actually, do some basic assessment over that phone call to figure out if fit will be there, right? If I'll be a good therapist for them, and can I support them enough? But I tell the adults right off the bat. So this is how I structure it. Not only do I want to work with your child every week, but at least one time a month, as many adults as we can get in here. That's sort of a requirement. And if you can't do that, then I might not be the therapist for you, because children, it's not appropriate to have children be the sole agents of change. They need that adult support. And so then in those adult only sessions, I'm holding the adults, I'm helping them process through something, and maybe giving some parenting education. Because, right, if you have the child who's disruptive in class, that's not easy as the parent. You might feel some shame, or let's say you have something unhealed from your second grade math class. Maybe you were the kid that was struggling and no one knew how to help you. So you might get, kind of triggered in some way and like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And so maybe that adult needs a bit more support in processing through that. And, if I feel like they need a bit more individual support, then I might recommend, hey, I think it would be really great if you worked with your own therapist, and did a deep dive into what maybe is helping or what's making you feel stuck.
Yeah, well, I have a couple questions. One, can you elaborate a little bit more on the vacuum comment?
Yeah, so as in, if we think about like a vacuum, right? There's just that straight tunnel, if you will. Life isn't like that. We don't sit in our rooms. Well, I should say we don't want to sit in our rooms during childhood and just be alone all the time. We want to spend time. We want kids to spend time with their caregivers and their siblings if they have siblings, or, whoever they live with, their grandparents or their aunt and uncle, or all that kind of thing. But even outside of the family then, right, we're looking at the whole system, your school system. How does the principal and the teacher and the social worker and the lunch provider and the janitor, how do they all work together? And then what does that mean for the kiddos that are there during the day, or now, virtually? Our communities, how can we come together as a collective in our neighborhoods, in our towns, in our states, and then globally as a country, and all that kind of stuff?
I'm feeling a lot of pressure and the weight of the world right now. Like the amount of domino effect that you have just by one kid just makes me feel very similarly. Like I can relate it architecturally, like we got the foundation, then we got some steel, you know what I'm saying? But like the emotional content of that, on a more mental perspective, like my mental health, I talk about this with Lauren a lot. I'm very open about my mental health. Like I'm in therapy myself, but like I am just impressed by, I think, your ability to contain. I need to take a minute and say I found the spider. I'm sorry. Continue. My ability to watch you contain that in your field. I don't know about you, but like, Lauren, I was thinking about asking Candace like more about herself in relationship to her field.
Oh boy.
Because
How many minutes do we have here?
LOL. But like I think about like what are the challenges that you're facing, not only as a therapist for other people, but like with yourself, right? Like a lot of people in my life have always asked the balance question. How do you balance being a therapist while dealing with your own stuff? And being a professional.
Or do you have a therapist? Aren't like all therapists supposed to go to therapy? Is that a rule?
I feel like it could be.
You know, there are some graduate programs out there that require it for their students. That if you're going to be studying some type
Who's paying for that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's part of how the school system
part of the tuition
was
package
developed. I would assume it's part of the tuition. But like, you know, if you're going to be a therapist or a helping professional, you need to get like 20 hours of therapy for yourself. So I'm gonna pair my answer, you know, how do I balance it, with just a quick response to what you said, Emma. You know, in the architecture world, and Lauren, I don't know what the words would be that fit with your field, but you know, scaffolding, right? You guys use that term, like, and
sorry, yes, we do.
Right. And like, you know, I think about construction, right? When construction workers are building a building, there's that scaffold literally outside the wall. The human condition is really a very similar thing, right? So attachment is...
Do tell.
So attachment, you know, that and a lot of the research focuses on the mother, because the mother, you know, carries the baby, but we do have a lot of research that focuses on, you know, the father as well, or the other parent figure, right? It doesn't have to be just, you know, the mother or the father. But the goal with families is that there's that I'll say adult baby bond, you know? So the minute that baby is born, and let's say, you know, if we're thinking in the context of, you know, let's just say the mother has the baby and the baby is put on the mother's chest. That bond is happening right away. I mean, it's happening in the womb too.
Yes.
But it's happening with that skin-to-skin contact. And attachment is really the basis for everything. And there's no time, and I know this isn't the podcast to go into the types of attachment, but, you know, if the child misses out on that consistent, healthy attachment, essentially, they probably will miss out on scaffolding in different areas of their life. And so the beauty of play therapy and TheraPlay and EMDR is that we can, quote unquote, go back in time and help repair that disruption or that missed opportunity.
Oh my goodness.
So therapy is powerful in that way. But then kind of molding that into that balance. Yeah, I mean, it's no easy... Is feat the right word? No easy feat, you know, being a therapist. Like, we don't, like, it's not, you know, we don't just go into that room and sit there and tell our clients, oh, you're struggling in your partnership, you should leave them or you should stay with them. Like, obviously we can't make those decisions for people. I can't even tell my clients' parents like how to parent them. I can give them new information and explore different aspects of their already parenting style, or even how they were parented, and that impacts how they are parenting.
Yes.
But, you know, that takes a lot out of us. And what we talk a lot about in the field is burnout. You know, we have research that shows, you know, if you're working with X amount of clients per week or more, you're more at risk for burnout. It's not recommended by anyone specifically, but, you know, it's never a bad idea as a therapist to have your own therapist because, right, we have our own lives. You know, maybe we have our own traumas that haven't been dealt with. And if that shows up in our room and we haven't touched on that yet, if we go into some sort of, you know, dysregulation, for example, and then we can't help that client in front of us, then it becomes about us. And that's when we're going into some unethical stuff.
And you don't want that.
No, not at all. Because, like, here's the reality, folks, right? Like, you pay us to get support and to grow and heal. You shouldn't be paying us to listen about our stuff.
Well,
that's just,
I think
that's
I'd be
not
mad.
appropriate. Yeah, absolutely.
And as a child, I would be confused.
Right. Yes. I mean, there's moments of self-disclosure in the therapy room. I have told kids before, like, I'm trying to think of like an easy example.
Like, I'm a sister.
Yeah, like I'm a sister, and I've been in fights with my sisters before, and that's really tough. And that's usually like the end of it. I don't go into details, but just to be able to relate to them, and to help them understand that they're not alone. But, it gets, just gets tricky. So yeah, if you've got unhealed stuff, and that's my advice, if any of you out there listening are thinking about going into graduate school to be a therapist, I recommend getting your own therapist, even from that point.
I recommend everybody goes to therapy, regardless of if you want to be a therapist.
I do too. Yeah, everyone.
Because my goodness.
And it doesn't have to be a crisis. You don't have to be at rock bottom to start therapy.
Yeah, I saw this really cool meme on Facebook once where it was trying to explain like why people should go to therapy, and it was like this girl who was knitting a scarf. Mm-hmm. And her therapist was actually unraveling the tangles of the yarn.
Yes.
So like it was trying to explain that like you're doing the work by making the scarf, but your therapist is just trying to like organize your thoughts so you don't sound crazy in yourself, because people think they're crazy and you're not. Like you're very valid in your feelings.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool, but that's like the best way I've been told, and that's kind of what convinced me is like no one's telling me what to do.
Yeah. I mean, here's the reality, you guys. Like, we are relational creatures, our species. And I purposely say it this way, no matter who or what you believe created us to be relational. We cannot live this life alone. It's not possible. And if it happens, it can be a big struggle. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever learned in, if you took psychology in high school or even in Psych 101 in college, but, there's all those studies out of Romania about the orphanages. Kids who grow up in isolation and are not even touched, like held and rocked and kissed, they die. That's what the science shows us. And
that's really intense.
Even as adults, we need healthy touch. We need healthy relationship. It's one thing, and I'm not talking about like temperaments like extroverted and introverted. I'm not talking like that, but just as the basis of our species.
I think it's probably why people are suffering right now in this pandemic.
Absolutely.
The lack of contact that we have with our friends and our family is just like eating us alive.
Oh, absolutely. Like when this started, I didn't hug our parents for I don't even know how many months. And then
because we were afraid.
Yeah, because we didn't know. And then, when I felt more comfortable, and so did they, we all threw our masks on and turned our heads. And man, I kind of cried, like to be able to hug my mother, like how magical, and kids, kids need that too. And kids are feeling it hardcore right now, they're social creatures, right? And we need that peer experience as part of our social and emotional and mental well-being and development. I mean, the teenagers, yes, maybe they're on the technology a lot anyways, but they still need to be in the same room with their besties, even if they're all on their Snapchats. And I can't do that right now. And so it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about just, how Lauren and I discuss like this podcast, we always hope that people who have friends or don't have friends can consider us as like their friend.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
Like this is a great way that we hope that people can reach out and have a relationship with us, because we're two normal girls, women, growing and changing and like adapting to this world. And like Lauren and I have disclosed this before, but like we recognize we have privilege and we recognize that we come across a lot of rarities that don't happen in every family type, culture. That perspective is very, very different, obviously, but like Lauren and I have been doing this podcast over the internet.
Yeah.
Like, it's changed the way that we react to each other, how we communicate, how intentional we are with our time together. But I love the way that you describe being a therapist and having balance in your life, because like that gives me some kind of trust in you. Like, you don't think that you're the ultimate responder, right? You have so much more learning that you're probably doing.
Always. Honestly, the one of the best pieces of advice from I think it was one of my supervisors in my practicum, was that they basically said, if you ever get to a point in the field where a story doesn't surprise you, or you don't maybe feel it in your heart a little bit, or you think you have all the answers, you best be go call your therapist, or you best be, consulting with your colleagues, or maybe going out and getting some self-care.
Wow.
Because those are, at least in that person's opinion, some signs that you're heading down a rough path, or you're already there, and, or burning out,
right.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Which makes a lot of sense, because, I mean, if you're not, what's the thing, the term, the cup half full, can't give when you're not full.
You can't give from an empty cup.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
I like the the plane analogy, instead.
Oh, what's the plane analogy?
Put your mask on first before helping
others.
Oh,
I was like, we're driving a plane?
Yeah, like what the
plane
like
analogy.
the airplane, like the the flight attendants tell you, like, if in the event of the emergency, you put your mask on first and then help the person next to you.
Yeah, you can't.
If that isn't a life
you can't
advice.
give to others if you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But again, life is complicated. So even if we are getting our own support, if we're moving through something tricky while holding space for our clients, sometimes we have heavy days. Sometimes at the end of the workday, I'm just like, even to my husband, like, please have dinner on the table. You can do whatever you want tonight. I need solitary, I need a solitary night. I need to just binge Netflix and go to bed. And there's nothing wrong with that, to hear challenge is challenging.
Lauren, we were talking earlier about just like you being a person in business, in therapy, in a field that like is very complicated, and we don't really necessarily understand the details of that. But like, we were talking about how like this is a podcast for women, by women, and I've loved this conversation so far, but I was wondering if we could steer it in a more personal, even more personal way, and say like,
wait, I still have a question.
I didn't even know you had a question.
Well, I just want to throw it in there before we change.
Okay, yeah,
is that okay?
I'm ready.
Okay, I have a question. Okay, we were talking about play therapy and what you do say you get a new client. My question is, do parents get like frustrated, or are they surprised when you don't necessarily have answers that they want like right away? I mean, I feel like doing this thing with children, like it probably takes a lot of sessions to kind of build up to those answers, or what's struggling with them, or like what should be worked on. Is that a good representation of what happens? Right on,
Lauren.
It's one of a bazillion scenarios. Yeah, for sure. I mean, remember, not only are the kids struggling in some way or stressed out, but the caregivers are as well.
Right.
Usually,
Yeah. I mean, so are the parents ever like, what do you mean you don't know what's wrong with my kid? Right.
Yeah.
or like, it's been 8 months or something, do they ever
I have been in those scenarios too. And what then my goal is, as best as I can, is to focus on my relationship with them. Okay, it's been 8 months and you're not seeing the results that you were hoping for. Let's chat about that. What was, I mean, ideally we're talking about goals from the start, how do we know change is occurring? What are we going to be seeing and hearing? How do you know, mom, dad, grandma, uncle, whoever's bringing the kid in, that you're ready to be done with therapy, or that your child is? But yeah, like, so it's been 8 months and you're not seeing what you thought you would see. What's going on for you? You come here for 53 minutes a week, or right now it's all telehealth, and you're expecting something different. Talk to me about that. And I try and make those conversations, I try and normalize those conversations from the beginning. So in my little speech at the start, I let parents know, or caregivers know, if things are not feeling right or going right, tell me. Let's schedule a session and let's chat. I want to know what's going on for you. And if I'm off track, it's your kid, I'm not the end all be all here. I want this to be a partnership. So
they have to help you help them a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's all together, right? Like, they are the experts of their child, whatever that looks like. Yes, I have expertise, or I'm sorry, not expertise, but like training and education and experience and specializations. But I don't know Johnny, who comes from the Smith family down the street in that town over there. I mean, you guys know him. Right. So help me understand him and what makes him, him tick and all that stuff. But I also tell folks from the beginning too, that they got to do the work. Parents and caregivers, if they're not ready to do the work, then maybe they're willing to stick around at least and bring the kid, but they really got to put in some kind of effort. Because again, right, kids should not be the sole agents of change for a family.
Yes. I really like this conversation, Lauren. Thank you for that question. Because I'm starting to think about when I was younger and I was seeing a therapist, like, I'm curious how much conversation she had with our parents without, and like how much of a agency that might have made me feel, knowing that there was support at home because there was conversation had prior or after the meeting I had with my therapist. And I think people, I don't know about you, Lauren, but like I feel like sometimes I forget about all the factors and the people and the perspectives that go into a simple task, but rather that this is like a very thought-provoking, intense moment with a child that not only is Candace balancing the kid, but like she's got to talk to a set of parents, and that might come with multiple groups of parents.
And even when it's not something that's thought-provoking, even when it's the sessions where you're like, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but maybe it's not as intense. They come, you play with them, you learn some new things, but it's not like a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Is being made or something. And you talk about trust and rapport and like building that relationship with your clients. I think that's interesting, and I relate to it even as an engineer because I'm a manufacturing engineer, and I do the same thing at work, right? So when I want to change a manufacturing system, I got to get everybody on board. Everybody who's actually doing the work, who's on the floor, we talk about it. I say, what do you think about this? You have to get their buy-in. You have to earn their trust, earn their respect.
Yeah.
And like me with full adults, and then it's kind of funny, like, so I might bring in manufacturing practices, and they might have to unlearn some bad habits, right? And that's really hard. And it's just it's funny to hear you talk about that from like a child therapist relationship, because I relate to it so much, because sometimes it's such this big learning curve that you have to go through on how to earn their trust, because like you will make no progress without them, right? And being on the same team.
Yes, exactly. And I know none of the listeners can see us, but like I did this like extreme pointing thing in the air just then.
My brain is just like blowing up right now.
When Lauren said the buy-in, and that's everything. We got to get the buy-in, and that comes, like you're saying, through rapport and trust. And we even have research that shows that the rapport is, I think it's, oh gosh, forgive me, colleagues, it's either the most or one of the most important factors as a change agent for the client. So meaning,
wow. And I think that's true of any age.
110%,
right?
110%. You could be 95 going to therapy, or you could be 1 in therapy. And if you don't have trust with that if you don't have trust with that therapist, change ain't gonna happen, or it's gonna be really bumpy and messy.
Walls will be built, not broken.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the truth, you guys. We don't go into these client relationships thinking, oh, we're going to be together forever. We want you as the client or your child to feel safe and comfortable and heard. That doesn't mean that, that relationship challenges won't come up. Like maybe I'll put my foot in my mouth and I'll say something wrong, or, I'll mess up in the playroom and the kid.
Mistakes.
Yeah, I'll make a mistake in the playroom and the kid gets a little like, oh, thanks, Candace, and maybe they're a little ornery for the week and then they come back and then we repair. But I say that from the start as well. Look, here's the thing. If we get to X amount of months or weeks and we're not feeling it, or if you guys aren't feeling it just specifically, tell me. And then my job will be to help you find the better fit. I'm not the right fit for everybody. I want to be. I wish I could help the world, but I'm not. And that's okay.
Well, I think that's why it's so important to have those perspectives and that knowledge, because like researching what kind of career I want to have, what kind of firm I want to work for, I would say goes the same in your therapist. Like, who do I want to talk to? What do I want them to look like, embody? Because like I know how important it is to have someone that is a female. Mm-hmm. That makes me feel validated.
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that.
Tell me more.
So we're talking about this. See, it's so funny because me at work, I'm going up to people who this is their life. They've worked at the company forever. Like they're so good at their job and this and that. And then little me, this like young petite small woman walks up and is like, I'm an engineer, like we should do this and this and this and it'll make it better, right? And they're like looking at me like, who the heck are you, right? So what is you, and Emma as well, like what are your instances where like that's kind of put on you, or do you feel like you have to come from a different perspective, or people don't want to use you as a therapist because you're a woman, or like just what's that kind of like perspective? Because I kind of have to earn their trust because like I'm this little small girl who's like coming and telling them what to do, right?
Well, before you answer that, I was going to say like our fields are male dominated. Is that what your field looks like?
Yes.
No. So, and I want to be careful because I don't know all the details of the reality. So no, we are predominantly a female-led field. There are male therapists. We need more male therapists. We do, because boys, right? Boys need to learn. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like we as women can teach them this, but I think for some boys, it may be absorbed differently from, a man, or, someone that they can relate to differently. That, boys can feel, or should be feeling feelings too. Emotional intelligence is not gendered. Emotional intelligence is not for girls or those who identify as girls, right? Emotional intelligence is a human condition, no matter your race, your ethnicity, the country you come from, your gender, your sexual orientation, your age. Emotional intelligence is something that we all need to foster. And that's a spectrum, right? Some people are more, academically, what's the word I want to say? Inclined, or that's a strength of theirs. Like I am not intelligent or intellect over emotional as far as that type of skill. Like I am very the opposite. I'm E over I. I live through my body, through my soul. My emotions are on my sleeves. I am connected to you through my core. My I have friends and family that are the opposite, that they are all that left brain and that logic and that analytical mindset. And so emotional intelligence is either really challenging for them, or it just looks differently. you know?
So what does that look like in the day-to-day? Like Lauren was saying, like, do you come across those challenges because you are female or because you are, white? Unfortunately, I'm going to say that, but like
Yeah,
that's
no,
the reality of today.
for sure, absolutely. And again, it's about the client's comfort level. So if someone doesn't want to work with me because, I'm a bit younger, I'm white, or I'm a female, or I don't know, this hasn't happened, but I'm blonde, or what is my status as a parent or not a parent. I've worked with clients who, when they realized I'm not a mother, they didn't feel comfortable working with me anymore. And that's fair, It's not always easy to hear that as a therapist, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that must hurt, but it's understandable.
Absolutely.
I guess.
I mean, yeah, the client just needs to feel safe and comfortable. And again, I can't be the right therapist for everybody. That would be bonkers.
Well, you'd go crazy.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Well,
but
Lauren, we're getting to a point where I think we should wrap up, just because we've had
I know, but I cut you off before, so if you wanted to, I know you kind of wanted to gear the conversation a different way. We could still record it if
that's
you
fine.
want.
I can do both. Okay, so like Candace, I think we've really learned a lot about like what it's like working with kids with you, where your background is from, why you established this business. But like, I think I'm kind of curious more so about your perspective as a female business owner. We appreciate your knowledge. Thank you so much for willing to share that with us. But I want to know now a little bit about what it's like to sit down and have this decision. Like, I'm going to open up my own business. I'm a woman. I don't know what it looks like. I know building a business from the ground up has its challenges. So, is that encouraged in your field? Do people expect you to work for other people? Are you hoping for this to be something beyond what it is now, or like just anything that you have? I wrote down this question, like, what is your biggest hope with this, and what is your deepest concern?
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, so I think, being a woman, identify as a woman, she, her pronouns. I think it's wonderful that I have this opportunity, and I do think that more girls need to see women in different aspects of life. And, let's break that down even more. Let's say through race or sexual orientation, representation matters.
They want people to look like them.
Absolutely.
And right, you guys are talking about the kids that you've, worked with or maybe have mentored, or however you do that. Kids need to see that when they grow up, this thing is possible, Yeah. And so I don't know, at least right now, I don't have a goal related to helping little girls know that they can be a business owner one day, if that's their path. My biggest hope really for this business is to serve. And, Emma, to answer that question, or to respond to that comment that you made about, how did you say, is it encouraged to work for others? That's really personal and subjective. We have mental health agencies, we have group private practices, day treatment programs, hospital settings, in-home therapy.
The list goes on.
Yeah, list goes on. And so that's really subjective on what environment is best for you. And I've done a lot of other things before this practice. I've been in the field for 7 years, and I've dabbled in different areas, and they were great, and I learned a lot. But I was just at a point where I was ready to be my own boss and to do things that made the most sense for me. And I wanted a different type of work-life balance. And so my biggest hope is just to be able to serve those in my community and surrounding communities and to help. But now that I have what I'm calling is more free time, because I don't work 5 days a week, I don't work 40 hours a week, face-to-face client time. I want to get into advocacy work, partnering with birth centers and early childhood family education programs, doing lectures and talks and teaching parents about, child development, positive parenting techniques. I want to do, if people think that I'm worthy of sharing information, I'd love to do more podcasts. I want to be a voice for the voiceless. And I truly believe that a lot of children are voiceless and they need someone to advocate for them. I am curious about policy even and the political world. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to run for politics or, be in that position, but I'm really curious about how does policy influence people's abilities to not only seek out help, but actually get the help that they and their children need. And so I don't know what that looks like yet, but one of my basic core value systems and beliefs is that if we did put more money and attention and proper educated focus into children and their systems, we would have a very different society. I wholeheartedly believe that. And if I can make a little bit of have a little bit of influence in that way, then I'm going to try, because I'd like to be in my field for at least another 35 years.
Absolutely. Well, that was awesome, Candace. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Did you have a concern? Or like a fear for starting the business? Like, were you terrified? I would be terrified.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I've heard this from other clinicians, I think one of my biggest concerns is, finances, making sure that, because yes, I'm here to serve, but I'm also here to make a living, right? And put food on my table. So, am I networking and marketing myself enough? Am I talking to the right people to then get those referrals and be able to pay my bills? But, when I've worked for others, there was sort of that automatic protection. Like if something happened, or if I had a question about ethics, I can go to somebody right away. Or, what is the policy of this agency or of this practice? Now all of that is on me. And while I take ethics extremely seriously and I have a lot of our ethical codes memorized, there's gray area in ethics and in this field. And so I sometimes worry about being isolated and not being able to go down the hall and knock on my colleague's door. So it's a lot of text messaging and phone chats now of like, hey, I need to schedule a consult with you, or I need to get my own supervision for a situation. And so I call my mentors and go to their supervision groups.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Candace, thank you.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. It's a great field. I love what I do, as hard as it is. I was not created to do anything else. This was the path that I was put on, and I'm excited to add some different variety to it now. But yeah, I'm exactly where I need to be.
That's really cool, Candace. Well, maybe this is a good time to plug your information. We heard about you, but like, where can we find you? And like, where can people who are in maybe that area that you live in can look you up and bring their kids to you, because you can help them?
Yeah, so I don't have a Psychology Today profile at this time, but if you go to my website, so holdingspaceTherapyLLC.com is my website. You'll get a lot of information there, my areas of specialty. I only work with children birth to 12, by the way. I should have added that at the beginning, but you'll see that on the website. And then presenting concerns and challenges that I typically work with or like to work with. And my phone number is on there and my email address is on there. I also have a Facebook page, Holding Space Therapy, LLC. And if you are a client out there, or maybe going to be a client, no obligation to like the page. But for those of you who won't be my client, please like the page.
Or even, I know that you've done like Facebook Lives
Yeah.
giving information on there
Mhm.
too. So like even if you're not seeking it or not in the area, you could still follow the Facebook page to get some more information.
Yes.
to-
Knowledge is power, people.
Yeah, I share the content that I try and focus on is, child development, emotional intelligence, parenting, systems. So I'll share, other people's memes about, hey, if we're gonna, heal our kiddos, we need to heal ourselves, and maybe we go back in
Mhm.
time and help our grandparents heal through our own work, all that kind of stuff.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us
Yeah.
today. I learned so much, Emma.
Of
Did
course.
Thank you both. This went by really fast. Everyone told me it was going to go by fast, and it did. So
Yeah,
all of you guys were right.
Good conversation and good people.
you? That was a lot
That was
of
awesome.
fun. So thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Oakview.
Talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to The Oakview. You can follow Lauren and Emma on Instagram at The Oakview Podcast, OAKVIEW, or email us at theoakviewpodcast@gmail.com.